If you're forced to abandon your main and re-roll to a different class, what would it be? Preheat, you go first.
I'm doing that, so it's already happening.
You're already doing that?
Mage, I'm going from Evoker to Mage spec, yeah.
Wait a minute.
He's going back.
Wait a minute.
Going from one main to another.
Wait a minute.
Okay, I have to choose a new one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to choose a new one. I mean, I like Demon Hunter, it's fun, but you're not really selling it to me in this episode, I'll be honest with you.
Good.
Not,
If we're not selling it, we're doing our job.
All right, welcome everyone to the 7th episode of the Warcraft Workshop. This episode is going to be a little different than what you've seen in the past or what you've heard in the past. This one is going to be a bit more honed in on a certain topic, and this is something that I honestly was going to do on a separate platform altogether, but I was like, you know what? This is important. We need to get some eyes on this stuff, and this is probably the best way to do it. So this episode is going to be talking about Havoc Demon Hunter, or just Demon Hunter in general, going into the War Within, what's been happening on the beta, and kind of why everyone is losing their minds over what could potentially happen to Havoc over the next month if things don't change. So we have two guests with us today. First one is Atrayen. How's it going, man? Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be back. Granted, not on this platform, but I've been on your others.
Yes. You have been I think you've been on every episode of the Havoc Roundtable podcast. Pretty
That's
sure.
Correct.
Yeah. The other guest that we have today is the one and only Voodoo. Hello.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for having me, Jedith. And I guess second Havoc Roundtable thingy we're doing.
Yep. Second time. And then, of course, my co-host, Preheat. What's up, man?
Hello. So yeah, I mean, today obviously we're delving into new topics with Demon Hunter. Not really my cup of tea being melee, but I'm interested to hear how your insights and what the struggles you're facing on the beta kind of relate to the classes I play, because I know there's probably going to be some overlap between just like general class design stuff. So definitely here to listen today.
For sure. Yeah. We had a mage talk last week or 2 weeks ago, and I had to sit there and pretend like I understood too. So now it's your turn.
Now it's his turn. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. So
it's only fair.
Havoc players are freaking out right now. They're losing their minds. And some people are probably saying, Havoc is doing an insane amount of damage on the beta. What are we complaining about? Atrayen, do you want to just give a brief overview? Let's not go into too much detail just yet, but just give like a kind of quick synopsis of what's happening.
Of course. So, like Jedith said, I also want to reinforce this. We're not complaining about performance or tuning. Like, if you look at Havoc overall, it's been topping meters relative to Arcane Mage, which I believe has a bug on Spellslinger right now, which is causing it to do like 8 times the damage it's supposed to do. And then Unholy Death Knight, which was just overtuned to begin with. Havoc's core problems really boil down to the talent tree is workable, but it's not perfect. And there's really an illusion of choice between our two hero trees. One hero tree is kind of bland, but works, and the other is extremely overbearing as to what it does and sucks to play.
Can I interject real quick on the Arcane thing?
Yeah, please. I actually want to hear this.
Would you believe it if I told you that the bug is actually very small and it's really just us being overtuned? Yeah. The bug is actually, so there's a bug. You're right, there's a bug. But actually, most of it is just coming from our damage. We just do a ton of damage.
Got it. So, I mean, relative to overtuned classes, then we're keeping up. So, I mean, we're definitely not complaining about our performance. It's all rooted in play and the decisions that we have to make within our class and spec trees.
So those two hero talent trees, just for people who may not play Demon Hunter, they're watching this and we want to keep everyone up to speed with what we're talking about here. The two Demon Hunter trees are Felscarred, which is the incredibly simple one. Doesn't change gameplay much. Kind of feeds into like the old Havoc playstyle that we might have had in BFA, where we're just trying to stay in demonic as much as possible, and is very basic. Then the other tree is Eldraki Reaver, which is, it's way too much. It's convoluted. There's insane amounts of buffs, damage amplification buffs that are stacking on top of each other. You're spinning so many plates. The common thing that people are saying is you need a PhD in rocket science to play this spec. It does insane damage. It's very, very good. Almost too good. But you have to really, really invest every inch, every micro, neutron of your brain to play this hero talent tree. So I'm going to pull it up on the screen. Do we want to give like a quick explainer of how this hero tree works, Eldraki Reaver? I think it would probably be useful for people to understand. So essentially how it works is you have to spawn soul fragments. To spawn soul fragments, you can spawn them one main way, which is through your Chaos Strike. That has a very small % chance to spawn them. Once you get soul fragments, you need 6 of them. When you have 6, you'll be able to use this ability, Art of the Glaive, or Reaver's Glaive. When you use Reaver's Glaive, it opens up the opportunity to perform they call it a pattern. So the pattern can go Blade Dance into Chaos Strike. If you go that route, then that puts a damage increase debuff on the target that it hits, a single target. If you go the other way, if you go Chaos Strike into Blade Dance, that makes Blade Dance do extra slashes, which is, again, a little bit misleading because it's not extra slashes of Blade Dance. It's a whole different damage thing called Art of the Glaive. So that's essentially like just the quick way that it works. There's also other aspects to it where you have Thrill of the Fight, where once you complete a pattern, it increases your attack speed by 15% for 20 seconds and your damage and healing increased by 30%. Now, there's things to know about these damage amps that can get a little... this is where it gets broken, right? Because we're getting 30% from Reaver's Mark if you end with a Chaos Strike. We get 30% from Thrill of the Fight, so that's 60% increase. Chaos Strike also just has a 30% flat increase all the time. So you can see how it starts to add up. There's a bunch of other things that are also adding on to this. It's problematic because the other hero talent tree doesn't have any of these damage amps. It's very basic.
It doesn't have anything, basically.
Yeah. If you want to give like just a quick synopsis of what Fellscard is.
Yeah, so Fellscard is basically the tree that's supposed to be kind of like the whole demon-y aspect of Demon Hunter, which is kind of funny because the best way to play it is not even with Cycle and Shadow Destiny, which is the stuff that wants to be in Demonic. But basically, the main idea with it is whenever you use some way of entering Demon form, I-Beam works for Chaos Strike and Death Sweep. Meta works for I-Beam, Chaos Strike, Death Sweep, Immolation Aura, and Sigil Flame. Whenever you use those, you just kind of do this little Fel Eruption every time. The first time you push each of those empowered buttons. So it's kind of playing into that, like, when we're in our demon form, our abilities are stronger. And that's kind of all it does. Each one you do like ramps up. So if you enter your meta form, you push Chaos Strike, you do Explosion, you push Blade Dance, or Death Sweep, I guess. You do a stronger Explosion. I-Beam gives you a slightly stronger Explosion. And then Immolation Aura, so on with Sigil Flame. And yeah, that's kind of all there is to it. There's not really all the other things on the tree are just like passives that don't really affect you at all.
Right. So it's not really altering our gameplay at all. If anything, it's just adding the effect of a talent that we've already had the entire time, Inner Demon, to more abilities. That's kind of what it boils down to. You can see the stark difference between the two hero talent trees. One is extremely complex. The other one is extremely simple. And unfortunately, the extremely simple one does like 3 times less damage than Eldrazi Reaver. So let's hop back over to Eldrazi Reaver and let's talk about where the problems actually lie.
Is the whole tree fair?
Yeah. Unfortunately, we can't scrap the whole thing. I think there might have been an opportunity for that a while ago, but here we are, a month away from the X-Pack coming out. So I think we're stuck with this. Let's talk about the rotation and why it can be problematic, why it's so overwhelming for people.
Well, I mean, before we even get into the tree itself, let's talk about the activation trigger. I mean, one of the bigger core problems that a majority of the Havoc player base have been bringing up repeatedly, not so much Vengeance, but Havoc has been bringing up, is that it all boils down to soul fragment generation. Soul fragments have never really been a core component of Havoc Demon Hunter. There was only one real time that it ever played into Havoc, and that was back in Battle for Azeroth with the Eyes of Rage rate. But even then, it wasn't so overbearingly rooted into Havoc as a playstyle. You had to worry too much about it. But now you have to get 6 in order to even begin participating in the tree. And those 6 soul fragments don't have an easy method of being acquired, right? So let's say you're rooted to the boss, and you have to be because the spec that you're playing is very much an uptime related spec, so downtime is death for your damage. Boss moves, you have a soul fragment or 2 left behind. Well, you can't go back and get them because that's downtime, but you need those soul fragments to continue participating within the Reaver's Glaive pattern that you are trying to keep up. So the problem already becomes apparent. I mean, you are locked to a mechanic that you don't really have any serious control over. So that
we also have
that right
no
away
way
is the
of
core problem.
of seeing those souls on the ground. Like Vengeance has hook-ins with weak auras and stuff like that to be able to tell when souls are on the ground, they consume them. Havoc has no such thing like that. So if the soul spawns and you miss it, or it's in a puddle you can't reach, or what Atrayen was saying, you move away, it's just they're done for completely. And it being an RNG thing outside of your soul, your sigils, which can generate them, feels terrible.
And that's not even factoring the new and exciting visual bug that is taking place on the beta realm right now, which is that you can see other Demon Hunter souls.
Ooh.
You can see their spawn, but not on the ground. Yeah, so it's very confusing if it's yours or not.
You see that Vengeance Demon Hunter tank casting Fracture twice while you're seeing their souls flying, and you think, wait, they're using the same soul skin as I am, for example, because you have yours glyphed. But I can't pick them up. They're not mine. So you'll bait yourself into walking over, and it's not really your soul.
Is there any in-game indication for how many souls you have out versus?
Not for Havoc. Vengeance
so you have to go
but
off.
Havoc does not.
So you have to go off like a combat log event to track how many souls you have active if you aren't just counting them with your eyes.
I don't even know if logs track them.
You can't.
Yeah, there's no tracking at all for Havoc.
Game for Havoc.
It's literally like if you do not see it spawn, you do not know it's there, and the spawn animation is not very clear at all.
Yeah,
but
so
the entire
you have spell effects flying like crazy.
Yeah, so the tree is built around this though. So it seems to me like this is the most unintuitive thing ever, because if you have an entire tree that's built around consuming X of a thing, you need to have some intuitive way for the player to know where they're at in that. Is there a buff that tells you how many you've consumed so far?
Oh, yes, the buff tells you I consumed. Yes.
Okay, thank God.
Yeah,
you have a stacking buff. You have a stacking buff called Art of the Glaive that is on your character. Once you hit 6 of the buff, then you have Reaver's Glaive available to you. You can stack another 5 after that without consuming the first Reaver's Glaive, but the second that you get the second round of 6, if you haven't consumed the first Reaver's Glaive, the second one is munched, so you don't get 2 in a row.
They stack above. You can have you can bank them. If you have like 7 stacks with a glaive active, and then you throw your glaive, you have to gain another soul, and then you'll get another one. They changed it
right,
I think, a while
that's
ago.
What I'm saying. You can't get the next glaive though without munching.
But we don't waste them. We don't waste them.
One thing that I haven't seen many people talk about is the fact that this might be a very niche situation, but when we're using our sigils to generate soul fragments, because we do have the new Sigil of Spite, used to be Elysian Decree, we use both of those with soul sigils. They generate an extra soul fragment, so we can use those to generate them. When you're putting down your sigils, you don't get the soul fragments to spawn until those sigils explode. They tick. It happens like a second later. The soul fragments that spawn from that will populate where your character was standing at the time that those sigils exploded. So if you're like running into a mob or a boss or something, and you pre-place a sigil, and it explodes, and your character was maybe a little bit back, you weren't quite at the boss yet, those soul fragments will spawn back there, and you won't be able to get them unless you go backwards, you backtrack to go pick them up. So there's a lot of things that they could really fix up with the entire soul fragment generation system, like how we generate them, how we consume them. There's so many missing factors that I think were overlooked when they were making a hero talent tree that revolved around all of that stuff. It seems.
I just think this problem is with the core activation mechanic of the tree. That's not even talking about the contents of the tree itself, and you already have a very big problem right off the bat that hasn't really been addressed in any meaningful way.
This talent Warblade's Hunger too, it says consuming a soul fragment causes your next chaos strike to deal damage. Is this stack at all, or is there intended gameplay that you use one, you consume a soul fragment, you do one chaos strike, and then you consume another sequentially?
There's no buff for that. We don't know.
No.
Yeah, I can't even tell you.
The only
it's
way
like
to
impossible
look
to do it sequentially either. So it's just it does so little damage. We kind of just ignore it for the most part, even if it was meant to be that. But I can't even tell you. There's no buff for it at all.
As far as I saw when I was testing, no, Warblade's Hunger does not stack. So if you consume 2, you only get 1 stack of that buff. But I mean, hey, Havoc soul fragments, everyone.
Yeah.
This actually does matter because Sigil of Spite or Suffering or whatever gives us 4 of them. So we just, only get 1 stack.
Yeah, that whole thing, that's just like Atrayen said, that's just the start of why this is problematic. So let's move past that now. What's the next step? What's the next problem?
I mean, the tree is insulting. Right, because as you were talking about, when you use Reaver's Glaive, you enter, I'm going to call it the Reaver combo for simplicity's sake,
okay,
where you have 2 choices. You can Chaos Strike into Blade Dance, or you can Blade Dance into Chaos Strike. The second ability is further empowered over the first. So, with one ability being a cleave ability and one ability being a single target ability, you would naturally assume, hey, in cleave situations, you Blade Dance second because that's the correct choice. And in single target, maybe Prio target, and two target situations, you Chaos Strike second because Reverse Mark is a better damage gain in that situation. It's logically sound, it tracks. But unfortunately, you're wrong. In every circumstance up to, and this was tested on Sims, 10 targets, the correct choice is, and always will be currently, to Blade Dance into Chaos Strike, and then on multi-target to just tab target to pop Reverse Marks on the mobs that have been affected by Reaver's Glaive. That is the correct choice. You have two choices, and you still only have one correct answer, which is why I find the tree utterly insulting.
This is worse for Vengeance too. Vengeance is every single target count. They always do the Reaver's Mark. They never do the empowered slashes.
That's interesting. So up until 10 targets, it's always just you treat it single target. 10 targets and above, it becomes AoE.
And the only reason we don't have an answer for above 10 targets is because I don't believe Sims support anything above that. So it could be up into infinity.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
You just tab target it.
This kind of reminds me too, like I feel like this is like a theme in The War Within where AoE abilities just like aren't worth trying to press at all. Like you don't Flame Strike as Fire Mage, you don't Arcane Explosion as Arcane. Like even above 10 targets, you still never press Arcane Explosion. Now that we've been looking at the Sims, like whatever they're cooking, it doesn't seem that they've really looked into AoE, or at least that's kind of what I read into it, because there's no way this would fly otherwise, right?
I mean, in many ways, I think I would attribute this back to, I think it was the start of Shadowlands, right? When they were trying to target capabilities and they were trying to discourage you from just mass AoEing giant poles in Mythic Plus. They told the community at large, basically, that is not the way that we intend you to play this game. And they've been continuing to double down on that philosophy. So if it turns out that it's not the correct decision to buff your AoE spells, I mean, it's logically consistent with what they've been doing for the past couple expansions.
Yeah, it's perplexing because it's like, what is the purpose of the AoE spell if there's never a target count where you would want to press the AoE spell?
It's just a trap at that point for players who don't know.
Yeah.
Which is terrible.
And it's not even the fact that it's not like it's target capped, really. Like the extra glaives, Art of the Glaive, it's uncapped.
It is uncapped, yes.
It's completely uncapped. As is Demon Surge from Felsguard. Those are both uncapped. It's not like it's a target cap holding us back. It's truthfully just not powerful enough compared to what the single target bonus is. Yeah, that's a problem. Having to just focus mainly on the one choice. It's like the train said, the illusion of choice. We only have one. So why does this become a problem in Mythic Plus then? Aside from having to focus on a single target, how does the rotation change in Mythic Plus?
So disclaimer, I haven't tested Mythic Plus nearly as extensively as other Havoc contributors have. So
I've done like one dungeon, yeah.
Yeah, I'm going off of largely what they've explained, but I can see how it works out. Mythic Plus, you do play talents like Essence Break and your Throwglaive talents. Because the correct choice is always to Blade Dance into Chaos Strike, that means that your Reaver's Glaive cooldown is not just the amount of souls that you have, it is the amount of souls that you have plus Blade Dance. Because you want to Reaver's Glaive before you Blade Dance. You want to also ensure that you have a Blade Dance up for Essence Break, which means now your cooldown can, in fact, be limited by Essence Break. Well, you're also having to be limited by the fact that Throwglaive is a rotational button in Mythic Plus because of Accelerated Blade, Furious Throws, Soul Rend, and now Reaver's Glaive. So you are using Throwglaive, which has two charges that you don't want to sit on because that's a DPS loss. Reaver's Glaive replaces Throwglaive as not an additional button on your action bars, which means that if a pack is about to die, you have two charges of Throwglaive, it would live long enough to benefit from Soul Scar, but not from Reaver's Mark. Then you don't want a Throwglaive, and if your Blade Dance has 7 seconds of cooldown remaining because you're out of Demon Form and you don't have haste, you're sitting there maybe on 3 targets for 6 seconds with a timer that actually matters, spamming Chaos Strike because anything else is actually griefing the next pull already. Already have to consider this with I-Beam because of Demonic, and with Immolation Aura because of Ragefire. So now you have 3 abilities that you actively have to think about relative to the next pack and how soon it is relative to what you're currently doing. Which is why people are saying, hey, this spec requires a PhD in rocket science. Because there are so many little decisions that you're now having to make while you're in a key that start to just overwhelm and exhaust you. And that is the core theme that I've been seeing from everyone who has actually talked about their testing of the Eldrazi experience in Mythic Plus. It boils down to it's exhausting.
Did you mention the tier bonus? Getting free blade dances?
I didn't even mention that. But on top of all of this, your Chaos Strike has I believe it's a 25% chance per Chaos Strike to reset the cooldown on Blade Dance. So you also keep that in mind when you have a Reaver's Glaive that is off cooldown and ready to be used. But I didn't really want to talk about that because that's only for one tier, and I'm looking toward the entire expansion, and having to deal with this just sounds awful.
So on top of all that, you're also dealing with the things that we've been used to playing in Mythic Plus, like, like you said, Essence Break, playing Inertia, Fell Rushing, Vengeful Retreating, all that stuff. So on top of what we've already been playing, we have so many more layers to consider when it comes to our rotation. You guys said that you didn't really do much Mythic Plus. I've done a bit, nothing crazy. I'm not doing crazy keys or anything, but I've spent some time in there, and I can tell you, like you said, it is exhausting. It's extremely exhausting. It's manageable. We're not even we can do it, but everyone's gonna hate their lives playing this.
Yeah. We're not even mentioning those non-rotational aspects like Souls Collection or where your position is, because Havoc is a positional spec when it plays the movement talents, right? If you fell rush into a pack or off a ledge or into a puddle or something or a frontal, you die. So on top of all the cooldowns, buff management, buff tracking, and overlapping 8 different windows, you also have to find your souls in a pack. You also have to know where you are at all times and know where you're going to go if you were to push a button at all times. And on top of that, we're also tab targeting our Reaver's Mark around. So there's 40 things to keep track of.
But guys, have you considered that Chaos Nova also becomes a soul fragment generator in Mythic Plus?
There's that too, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, you're using a stun offensively for soul fragments now. Very cool. We already saw the downsides of this when Sigil of Misery became a damage amp. Not all that excited.
But this costs Fury and is less cooldown.
True.
Yeah. And I don't want to backtrack a bit. I don't want to necessarily say that this is a Havoc unique problem. I don't know how every spec in this game performs. But if there are other specs that have to do with a lot of decision making pack to pack in Mythic Plus, they haven't necessarily always been meta either. And I want to call attention to that as well. If the entire point of simplifying rotations back in Dragonflight was to make sure you didn't have to actively think about this every second of every pack, then, they failed. They have failed.
Yep, I would agree. I always wonder that too. It's I see what happens in our little bubble of Demon Hunter. I see the conversations that are had. And I always wonder, how other classes fare in that sort of area. Preheat, you can probably talk on this a bit. Is it always doom and gloom in the Mage Discord? Or are we just, special in that way?
It's pretty doom and gloom all the time, yeah. It's a pretty similar situation, actually, for Arcane. Because Arcane damage is astronomically good, right? Arcane is insanely powerful. But the rotation, now that we have Sims, in the last 2 days, we found that it turns out the best thing to use whenever you don't have other abilities to press, your filler spell, Arcane Barrage. That's your spender. You don't build anymore. You just Arcane Barrage, Arcane Barrage, Arcane Barrage. The Sim will literally use it 10 times in a row if it gets unlucky with procs. So it's funny because it's really strong and it's really easy. And obviously using Arcane Barrage that much means that you're fully mobile. You're basically BM Hunter, right? But the problem is that no one wants to play that because it's just lame. You're just spamming the button, right? You're not thinking about anything. So the doom and gloom comes from the acknowledgement that, of course, Blizzard will not let this fly. There's no way they're going to let you just only use your spender and no builder, right? Or for Frost talents, how bad those talents are, right? Even if your class is good, there's always going to be a focus on what can improve. And I think that's natural, but I will say, listening to y'all talk about this Demon Hunter stuff, I already know the struggles of Demon Hunter because I sometimes do keys with them. And I play Augmentation, and that makes me annoyed because I have to deal with how weird their cooldowns are. They're always I need the Breath of Aeons for my Essence Burst, right? It's I'm gonna hit the I-beam, and then I'm gonna turn into a demon, and then I-beam again, whatever that combo is. They want that, and it's weird. It's not like anything else, right? So I already kind of feel some of the weirdness in the rotation, but having the tab target on top of Fellblade just being an I die button whenever I play my Demon Hunter, I swear to God, every goddamn time I press this button, it's it's like I'm Frogger running in front of cars, right? It's crazy how much that ability just kills people. But yeah, this is just on top of everything else, right? everything else you're already having to deal with. You're already on roller skates. There's banana peels everywhere. You could fell rush in anything last second, fell blade into anything last second, and now you're having to tab target too. That just sounds like a nightmare.
I love hearing a different class speak that way about Demon Hunter. That just makes me happy.
Hey, somebody go check on rogues. I hear they haven't had changes at all since the start of Alpha and Beta 2, and that one of their hero trees actually makes them want to uninstall the game.
Oh no.
Wonder what the theme there is between Havoc and Rogue.
I wonder.
Anyways,
one more thing. The funny thing about Fellblade too is that Eldrazi Reaver also actually adds a defensive benefit to it. It adds a 10% DR on a 5-second duration to Fellblade, which actually makes us both A, want to push it more, and B, it's a random RNG resetting ability. So you want to hold it for those moments, but there's also the chance that you could just get it back. So that's fun.
I suppose Arcane Barrage is a good segue.
Yep, to Raid.
As far as the spam for Arcane Barrage is a good segue as to the problems with Raid. Because Raid doesn't have any of these problems. Raid is not complex. Raid is very easy. You are maintaining a debuff on a target and spamming Chaos Strike. I wonder, has there ever been a period of time where Havoc has had that gameplay loop? I can't quite recall. Maybe
it's
it
like
had
branding me. I can't remember it.
It seems like a red period of time in Havoc's history. I don't know.
So I have a clip pulled up. This is the one that you sent me, Atrayen, of you doing the...
Hey, link in the chat so I can get it pulled up too.
Yeah, hold on.
Yeah. I was showing it on stream, but y'all couldn't see it, but I had a gif of like the Raptor mascot on rollerblades going down to the basketball court downstairs and slipping and falling. That reminds me of Demon Hunter and Keys.
Exactly.
Yeah. The rotation for Havoc Demon Hunter in Raid can be lovingly summed up as 1-1-1-2, 1-1-1-2, 1-1-1-2. Occasionally you might press 2. Yeah, you occasionally might press 2 after 1-1 because your Blade Dance resets, but for the most part it's you spam the hell out of Chaos Strike, you Blade Dance when it's off cooldown, you I-Beam when it's off cooldown, you're not really waiting for anything. You're maintaining Reaver's Mark as much as humanly possible, you're maintaining Thrill of the Fight as much as humanly possible, and that's it. That's it. Your entire gameplay loop is spam Chaos Strike, hope for souls on RNG, hope for Blade Dance resets, maintain Reaver's Mark.
Yep.
That's it.
The whole thing here is just to maintain that Reaver's Mark debuff on the mob, on the boss. Just to be clear, we're not using any movement for damage with this build.
We use VR.
Use VR. You get your initiative buff. But other than that, you're not fell rushing. Are you using Essence Break?
Nope.
No Essence Break.
No Essence Break.
None of that. All the fun stuff gone. So there are going to be some people that like the idea of this. But
yeah, I'm not saying inherently that this gameplay loop is bad. I think it should be an option for people who do like the old days of Battle for Azeroth. I'm just saying that making it our only build is not gonna make Havoc that great, especially with the consideration of just how overtuned we actually are being on the table. Right? It's highly unlikely that this continues to go live into the season, because if we are a 3-button spec and we're topping the meters with very little effort, we have insane durability, we have insane movement, we have one of the best raid utilities in the game as far as Chaos Brand is concerned. Like, there's no way we don't get nerfed. There's no way we don't get nerfed. We
fought so hard
tuned down
in Dragonflight to escape the 2-button class moniker, and here we are, just right back where we started.
Yeah.
Voodoo, do you want to give us a quick breakdown of kind of all the stacking damage amps in Eldrazi Reaver?
In the raid build or in the Inertia M+ build? Because that does change.
Let's do both. Let's start with Mythic Plus.
Okay, Mythic Plus, there's a lot of stacking buffs. So the first one, we'll start with Eldrazi Reaver because these ones are going to be the same in both of them. So the primary buff that we've been talking about is Reaver's Mark, which in most cases is going to be a 30% damage done to a target, unless you're tap targeting it, which again in Mythic Plus we're going to be doing that. This could be 15%. If you ever do the 15% one, you have messed up and you're losing a ton of damage. So that's the first point. The second one from Reaver's Mark, or Eldrazi Reaver, is Thrill the Fight, which is a 30% for 10-second buff. That happens every time you finish the glaive combo. And there's also just a permanent 30% Chaos Strike amp, which I'm going to include because I do think it's relevant, especially for single target. The other one that's shared between both is going to be Demonic, which is another 30% amp to Chaos Strike. So for single target, you have Initiative, which is your crit buff that happens on first hit of an enemy. or whenever you use Vengeful Retreat. So that's just 5% crit or whatever 8% crit. It's like the most minor of them all. Then you have 30% Chaos Strike at all times because of Incisive Blade. You have 30% Chaos Strike damage because of Demonic. You have 30% damage done because of Thrill of the Fight. And you have 30% damage taken because of the Mark. So that's right there, kind of what the whole single target stuff revolves around. In AoE, you have all of those, but you also are stacking on top of it Inertia, which is an 18% 5-second buff, and Essence Break, which is a 4-second debuff on a target that makes them take 80% more damage from your Chaos Strike and your Blade Dance. And I don't think I'm missing one, but I could be. There's like so many of them at this point that I might be forgetting one. But those are kind of all of
You're missing Warblade's Hunger, the 20%
right.
damage after Chaos Strike.
Yep.
Right. That's actually a separate damage event. So that's actually not even buffed by anything else, which you don't even realize by reading it. I think those are all of our buffs. I guess there's also like the background one of Chaotic Disposition, which is just like a random RNG roll that might make you do more damage and might not, but it's a lot of them.
Yeah.
So wait, so in AoE, like since Glaive does hit more than one enemy, what sort of like setup would this cause? Like, let's say I'm walking into a pack, right, and I've got every cooldown available, and I'm looking to just get my damage out. Like, how long would it take you to get? I
can send you a meme that has the whole rotation.
Okay, yeah.
Yep.
Let me get it. It's pinned in the Havoc Discord. I have to scroll down to find it.
Basically, it boils down to the start of the pack. You're using the Hunt to immediately generate a Reaver's Glaive, because that is the one quality of life change that they added to Eldrock Reaver recently, was that casting the Hunt gives you a guaranteed Reaver's Glaive. So you cast the Hunt to get your Reaver's Glaive up. Do you have to get in the meta immediately on AoE, or are you still doing the meme rotation where you have to do stuff out of meta first?
You're doing basically the whole meme rotation, to my knowledge.
Okay, so you're blade dancing, you're raw blade dancing, you're not I-beaming it. You're raw blade dancing, and then you're chaos striking, and then you're using Sigil of Spite. Then you're fell rushing because you have immolation up immolation aura up, and you're using inertia. Then you're I-beaming, then you're immolation aura-ing again, and then you're fell rushing. Now you're using essence break. You're backflipping using your death sweep. Finally, you're using meta. By this point, the pack is probably dead, by the way. You're Reaver's Glaving again. Death Sweep, Annihilation, I-Beam, and now you're playing like normal. 18 global cooldowns.
The meme I sent you was, I think the rotation's changed a little bit since that meme, but that's actually in order what you do. It's in the chat right now.
How much of, once you're fully online, is overlapping with the damage increase from the Hunt? Because if you're using it that early on, that's only 20 seconds, right? So by the time you get to that, you get maybe what? 10 seconds, 5 seconds. Is there not a damage increase from the Hunt? I was reading.
No. The Hunt gives you 10% healing.
Yeah,
off
just
of the damage you
deal.
Oh,
okay. It's just 10%
There's no damage
healing.
appetite to
okay,
it, yeah.
okay. Hold on. But don't you like wiggle right now to get the Hunt on everything? Is that changed?
For the
thing.
Once you've used the Hunt, you have to walk physically through anything that didn't get hit in your initial charge to apply the Hunt. So there's that aspect too. Yeah. Because it's not just an AoE explosion at the end of your Hunt. It's a charge that you now have to take through everything else once you're done.
Right, because the buff stays on you.
I think you only have like
very
half
short
a second to do. It's like half a second to be able to do all that.
The other thing is that Reaver's Glaive is actually doesn't trigger a GCD. It's on the GCD, but doesn't trigger one. So it's not as bad, but it's very weird and clunky. So you can combine it with different buttons, but it is on the GCD, but it doesn't trigger one.
Yeah, it's like the Final Fantasy OGCD stuff. So the same as Vengeful Retreat and also Hover for Evokers then. Where you can press a global and press it during the global.
Vengeful Retreat is a half global.
Half second, yeah. You actually have no global at all during it. So you can theoretically macro it into something, I think. But like there's literally no global that triggers. Like it doesn't trigger anything. Vengeful Retreat, Fell Rush do half. Fellblade does half. This does nothing.
Just want to touch on the Hunt before we move past it. The Hunt is essentially just an activator for us now in the War Within. Does a lot of damage in Dragonflight because of our tier bonus, where the tier bonus is doubling the duration of the dot, and we're getting cooldown reduction to use it more often. In the War Within, we're losing all of that. The damage is just in the bin. It doesn't do much damage. It's really only used as an activator now to get Reaver's Glaive instantly in our opener. That's the only use of it. Which is unfortunate because I think the Hunt is a button that a lot of people just enjoy pressing. It's a fun ability.
I-Beam's also kind of the same thing. It doesn't actually do damage, it's just for demonic. I know Preheat's not kind of part of it, but that's like an iconic ability that does nothing. It's just for buffs.
So we've touched on the AoE single target in raid we touched on, and we said that we're not using any of the fun talents. We're kind of just, it's all about generating and spending, getting Reaver's Glaive, keeping Reaver's markup.
You mentioned that you do use Essence Break and Inertia for Mythic Plus, but that is a good point. For raid build, there's no flexibility. You are actively losing damage by pressing anything other than Chaos Strike. So all of the effort to make things like Essence Break or Inertia or a Fire Inside or Fel Barrage or Glaive Tempest or any of the talents that people actually enjoy playing, by taking those talents, you are actively doing less damage than you possibly could. I believe if you try playing Inertia with raid build Eldrazi Reaver, your damage suffers like 7%.
Yeah,
Theoretical
7.5.
damage. You go from a 1.7 million sim to a 1.5 million sim because it's just too much bandwidth trying to add Inertia into the rotation. So you were literally back into the Battle for Azeroth gameplay for Havoc Demon Hunter in War Within.
Right.
And like I said, it's not inherently a problem. I think having that choice is a good one. And we've had that choice the entirety of Season 3 and the entirety of Season 4. People can play kind of whatever they want, but now you can't. And that was one of Havoc's core strengths, was that there were like 3 or 4 different play styles that you could use, and now you can't. You're stuck to one.
Is this true for Felskard as well? I know the tuning for Felskard, you said there's a big difference there, but like if it were tuned up, they turned one of those knobs up. Is there more variety theoretically on that side?
Inertia with Essence Break and the other build, which is basically Cycle, Shadow Destiny, and the No Mover stuff, they're very close together for Felskard. So if it were somehow to be brought up, they'd be more okay.
And that, I think, is a good point to point out with regard to the quote simplicity of Felskard, right? Because when it first debuted, when people in the Havoc Discord and Felhammer got their hands on the talents, I think one of the most visceral and initial complaints that everyone had was, it's so simple. It doesn't modify your gameplay in any way. Yeah, that's true. It doesn't. It doesn't really impact how you play the game at all. But is that necessarily a bad thing when you already have 3 separate talent build choices that you can play? I think the fact that it slots so neatly into all 3 of those build play styles and doesn't really disrupt the core of them is more than anything a strength, not a weakness. So yes, it is simple. It could impact your gameplay more. But I also think that if it did that, Havoc itself would kind of lose what made it so cool to play in Dragonflight after all of the effort to balance out every single talent choice in our spec tree.
So yeah, we could talk about Felskard. What are like the main problems with Felskard? Some people might say that the lack of gameplay influence is a problem. Aside from that, like functionally, where does it stand?
Well, right off the bat, the biggest problem with Felskard, and I was able to see this because I was one of the few crazy ones who decided to test Felskard instead of Eldrazi Reaver early on in heroic testing. Demon Surge, which is I think you could call it the core of Felskard, the main component of where most of its damage comes from.
It's the only part you ever actually kind of really feel is Demon Surge. Yeah.
It shows up in the very first talent you're ever taking. It's empowered by the last talent you're taking. And right at the very top of the center of the Felskard tree is a talent that empowers it further. In spite of all of that, on single target, can you guys take a guess as to where Demon Surge falls on damage breakdown on raw patchwork? Take a guess.
I know, so I'm not going to say.
Preheat, you guessed.
5%.
Yo, you're pretty good. That's roughly behind Melee, which is like 5.6. Demon Surge is like 5 to 5.5. Yep.
I'm just going off the
tooltips,
tips, so.
Yeah, your white hits do more.
So that's a problem.
Auto attacks are doing more than the entirety of the Felskard tree, which is very, very bad for tuning. Like that right there is a mathematic failure. I don't know how else to put it.
On top of that, too, I mean, the visuals for both trees. We didn't touch on it for Eldrazi, but the only visual you get for Eldrazi is you have a glaive that's slightly more purple that is impossible to see with any other spell effects present. So if there's players or if you're in a pack of mobs, you can't see it. So you basically don't see it. The spell effects for Felskard is basically a little green fart around you. It's like Sideways Hunt is what I call it because it's the same animation. They just turned it sideways. And that's all that happens. It's very minor.
Yeah, so I'm like reading through these talents, right? And this is the first time I've seen a lot of these. So I'm trying to figure out where the damage is in here because that's always a fun game to play.
The secret is nowhere.
Yeah, so I'm like looking through. I'm like, okay, well, so we get like 10% damage on some of our damaging abilities, cool. And we get like some, here small buffs here and there. But yeah, it just seems like If these are intended to actually give you like 20% damage, which is what Blizzard said in early interviews for hero talents, they're like, we're shooting for 20%. Some classes may have higher, but that's what we're shooting for. They really got to adjust this knob then, because I mean, this is the opposite problem of Spellslinger, right? You've got a passive thing that's giving you infinite damage. 28% of your damage is coming from an ability that's pretty much exactly the same as this thing, where it's just something that's passively happening while you're playing. There's no interaction with your actual gameplay. It's just printing,
which
right?
Which does actually also feed into the problem with Eldrazi, is that it is, if 20% was their goal and 30% was the hard maximum for what a hero tree can provide, Eldrazi itself is doubling your damage.
Wow.
Yeah, Eldrazi's like insanely strong. Just all those overlapping buffs is just insane.
Like the base Havoc Demon Hunter no hero talent sim is something like 800, 900,000, something to that effect. At Eldrazi, you get to 1.7 million.
It's actually under simming right now. Not all the effects of Eldrazi is actually in the sim. So the glaive itself causes your next Chaos Strike and Blade Dance to do 10% and then 20%, depending on which one you use first. That is not actually coded into the sim. So they are under simming. They're missing more damage amps.
Right, because that particular effect is a custom script that I don't think is very easy to replicate into.
Yeah, Topple's been having a hard time to
figure
out how to get it in.
Yeah.
Dude, they've been loving those custom scripts lately. We're having some issues too with the mage stuff.
And I feel like it's just burdensome on the back end because it's probably to break them, right? Like you do something somewhere else and, well, your spaghetti code is falling apart, and Blizzard is notorious with their spaghetti code.
Yeah, like you pop your netherwalk and suddenly one of these interactions just completely breaks for the rest of the time until you like log out, log back in, something like that.
Or die or something, yeah.
Yeah.
That could happen for all we know. I don't even know.
It could be, yeah. The majority of time that we had our hero talents, whether it was in alpha or beta, majority of them weren't working. They weren't working properly. We had to do a lot of digging and troubleshooting to figure out like what they were actually doing. If they were doing something, it was never the right thing. Like we had certain things. If I pull up the tree here,
I'm pretty sure Eldrazi didn't work the entirety of alpha. I didn't have it, but from like hearing what you've said, I'm pretty sure it didn't work until we got beta.
Yeah.
Well, I think it was like a third of it actually worked.
Yeah. I had a video that I put out. It was like the first look at Eldrazi Reaver, and I could only test it so far because like the majority of the tree was not yet implemented. Felscard, once we got it, it had this talent called Burning Blades, where Burning Blades, your blades burn with fell energy, causing your Chaos Strike, throw glaive, and auto attacks to deal an additional 10% damage as fire over 6 seconds. That just wasn't working. All of these things, all these instances of damage that you think would be converted to chaos with any means necessary, just weren't. And I think that was like the main reason why anyone thought this build might work, is because Demon Surge was initially fire, and we could convert it with AMN into chaos damage, and we'd get that multiplier from our mastery. We all kind of thought that would save it, but unfortunately it didn't.
Well, and the other thing that was kind of surprising was that when talents were initially data mined in the first round, when Eldrazi Reaver was debuted, the Demon Surge talent was also something that you could data mine in that particular build. And at the time, I think it did like 120% more damage than it does now. And then the other thing, Demonic Intensity, which increased the damage of each consecutive Demon Surge by 20%, got nerfed to 10 before we had it. Mm-hmm. So you're looking at how weak Demon Surge is relative to everything else that has been put out, and you have to question why they tuned those things down before we even had the chance to test them.
That data mine too had a component that caused you, every time you did a Demon Surge, that increased to also make you look more demony, or something along those lines. There was like a line of text in the data mine that referenced, I don't remember.
Grow and become more pronounced.
More pronounced. Yeah.
There was a line that referenced making you look more demonic with every Demon Surge, and that's just gone. So all we have is the Fell Fart.
The Fell Fart. We also have this talent, Focused Hatred, which is supposed to be kind of like the way that Felscard would work in single target, where Demon Surge deals 35% increased damage when it strikes a single target. The problem with this is it faces the same issue as our spec talent, Isolated Prey.
Isolated Prey.
Which, by the way, doesn't work. It hasn't worked for months.
It still doesn't work on retail.
Yeah, which is also a good point. We don't know if Focused Hatred is actually working. I don't think anybody's actually tested that.
Right. Yeah. As soon as there's an extra target, even if it's not an extra mob, if it's like anything, like it can be anything, a critter, yeah. You lose that bonus. we used to suffer from, what was the talent we had that summoned a demon?
Fodder to the flame.
Fodder to the flame.
Fodder.
Anytime we had a demon spawn, we'd lose that bonus because
Oh,
there
my
were suddenly
crusade
two
against
targets.
that talent. My crusade against that talent lasted the entirety of Dragonflight up until our rework, and when it was axed, I was so happy.
Hey, now people are saying they want it back. I've heard
No.
that.
Yeah, well, when you get a steaming pile of bad, people will fondly remember even some of the bad things of the past.
So, Voodoo, can you talk about the talents in Fellscard that are meant to boost our damage outside of meta? How are those functioning? What do they feel like?
Well, they don't really. You can't really feel them. So the two talents he's referring to are on the right side. There's one Enduring Torment that while you're outside of demon form, boosts your Chaos Strike and Blade Dance by 5% and Haste by 3%. And the other one, Monster Rising, just gives you 5% agility. The thing with that is that the numbers are pretty small and essentially like negligible. But they also have a weird kind of friction against actually what the tree wants you to do, which is get into demon form and have the empowered abilities and have more demon surges. So not only are they minor, they're really boring flat numbers, and they also pose a lot of friction onto the tree itself with what talents you end up wanting to take, which like inherently isn't that bad of a thing, but it's just for such a nothing bonus, it kind of doesn't feel great.
Yeah, you're not leaning into your strengths here, because
No.
all the other stuff is for you're in demon form, you're doing more, and then it's set for these things, right? 2 of your 8 traits here, or
Yeah, the funny
11
thing
traits.
is that the Fellscard tree is the one that's like all based around demon stuff, and the better build to play with this is the Inertia Essence Break one, which is you're in demon form much less, and Eldrachi is based around not being in demon form and like is based on warriors that fought Salgaris, so like anti-demon people. And the best way to play that build is to be in demon form as much as possible.
Is that with like Shattered Destiny?
Yeah, so Shadow Destiny and Cycle boost your demon form uptime to like 70%, I think is what we're hitting on Sims, or something roughly like that. And without that, you're down like 30 or 40%, I think, with like the Fellscard builds. So in Eldrachi, you're in demon form much more, even though like the whole thematics is like you're not supposed to. And with Fellscard, you're in demon form much less, even though the whole thematics is you're supposed to.
It also seems like that's just like you were mentioning before uptime. Now I get it, seeing this, right? Because any sort of forced downtime in the fight, any sort of disruption, you get a mechanic, you have to run out and do something. I mean, that could cost you way more than whatever the amount you'd normally be punished from having to do a mechanic is, right? Makes it way, way more punishing for, even though it's simple, if there's anything that disrupts your rotation, you get derailed, it's going to feel really bad.
The thing too
Downtime
is that
death.
the build itself, Eldrachi, with the uptime talents is still so far ahead that even if like unless a fight has like terrible melee uptime, it's still better than playing the inertia build, which is naturally better at dealing with downtime because you're doing your burst damage every 40 seconds and then you kind of plateau, you like go back down and go back up, a burst, whatever. With Eldrachi, the Eldrachi Cycle of Hatred, it's very flat line, but it's so much higher than the other one that even as long as it's like reasonable, it's still better.
So I think you sent a sim, Atrayen, of the damage output.
Yep.
Let me find it here.
Yeah, I sent the. Hold on, let me find it.
Well, while y'all find that, so just like an idea or thought experiment here. So fights where Demon Hunter are really good for that fight, right? Like if I'm building a comp, let's say I'm putting together my raid comp for the boss, and I'm looking at a Demon Hunter, I'm thinking, should we bring a second one? Obviously, we want one for the debuff unless we have a Vengeance tank. But, so a fight like Tindril, right? Tindril Sage Swift. Very good Demon Hunter fight because right now with the current design, it really leans into having that damage for the root sets. It almost lines up perfectly for you to do AoE damage in those root sets and still do good boss damage, which is surprising since a lot of Demon Hunters often have to fly as well. And generally flying would like cost you a lot of damage, but because of their current design, it seems like it doesn't really have too big of an impact. But from what you're saying, it sounds like if you were to want to play this build, that would be a really bad job for you. Like I would never want you to do any sort of extra mechanics because you have to be constantly hitting the boss. But then again, the strengths there, it sounds like you don't really have the same toolkit almost because you're not going to be able to hold the damage for when you need it, right? To help us not wipe to the roots. Is that true? Or would you still be able to like kind of hold it so that you have more bursts whenever you need it?
A lot of the burst on Tindril is from Fel Barrage, which is like a big talent.
Let's say you don't play Fel Brush and you're playing like Essence Break, for instance.
Yeah, it would not be that good.
Well, so are we arguing based off of the current tuning, or are we arguing based off of like the absolute worst case they nuke us by 50% week one?
Right, that's a
kind
good
of
point because
tuning?
right now we're like arcane mages in terms of how strong. I mean, not as strong obviously, but like we're like head and shoulders above
Yeah,
other single target.
it's safe to assume that we'll both be tuned down quite a bit. So I'm saying
Okay.
like in a case where you're, let's say everyone is doing 700k and that's like the baseline, right? That's like the middle of the pack, so to speak. So in that case, sounds like you'd actually be doing way less if you're having to ever have these disruptions, because obviously they're going to tune it for the best case, right? They're going to tune it for you having full uptime. You're never going to really have that happen in a real scenario.
I think you might still run 2 Demon Hunters on Tindril, largely because it still has the capacity for large burst. It's just you're going to be performing suboptimally, but it's not really a question as to whether or not you would, because Demon Hunters during progression on Tindril Sage Swift didn't run an optimal build for either circumstance anyway. So one of the things that I believe it was Evade that kind of set up the build that every other Demon Hunter used on progression for them guilds thereafter, the core damage to the roots came from stacking massive rage fires by taking isolated prey guarantee on single target. So when you were moving with Tindril, your immolation aura always crit to build into rage fire. A fire inside to try to proc as many immolation auras as you could, and then Fel Barrage on specific roots. Those things aren't really impacted too much by Aldraki in a circumstance like Tindril. So I would still run 2. That said, they're not going to be so insanely good that you would run more than that. Like 2 is a hard cap. You would definitely run 1 for Chaos Brand, obviously. You could justify 2, but anything more than that, no, you wouldn't.
So like obviously they have the ability to do that, but it seems like it would be way more inefficient to do it this way now, because you might give up more boss
Your single
damage.
target would suffer significantly.
Right.
Because
like just to be clear, whenever I'm talking about them being good at AoE, what I really mean is being efficient at doing both at the same time, kind of thing, right? Because like every bit of boss damage matters.
Build, like if we're not counting a Tindril situation specifically, if we're counting something like a Farak thing with like adds that are happening, or like a normal boss, I guess I should say, the base Reaver build actually has very good cleave because we're taking Accelerated Blade, we're taking Soul Rend, which is a damage amp from, well, not damage amp, but basically our glaive does more damage, and we still have a lot of Blade Dance resets. We still have I-Beam, and that actually does really efficient cleave while still doing good single target. But if we go in that like scenario, like because Tindril's an extreme, we would suffer a lot with this new stuff in terms of doing both. But on normal bosses, I'd say like a normal end boss or a normal cleave boss, it's still very efficient with Havoc. It's just you also have this insane uptime stuff requirement.
Let's touch on the visuals for both just real quick. I think we kind of said our piece with it, but just to make sure everyone else understands, we essentially have no visuals for both of these. Like we said, Eldraki Reaver has a purple glaive, or a glaive that has a little bit of purple aura around it that you don't really see if you're throwing it in close range, because there's no distance traveled and you just don't see it. That's the only visual. And then if we're looking at Felscard, again, like Voodoo said, we have the Fel Fart, which is essentially just a reused graphic, I guess, that we got for Elysian Decree. A couple months back in Dragonflight, we got a refresh of the animation for that.
The Hunt, yeah.
Oh, sorry, the Hunt, where they just turned the animation from blue to green. And then they took that green animation and flipped it flat on the ground. And that's the new Demon Surge animation. So that's it. And what people were expecting, I think, was, at least for Felscard, because we are changing some of these new abilities to be empowered or enhanced inside of Demonic, right? We're getting all of our spells changed into these new abilities. We get new icons for these abilities. There's new names. One would expect that those abilities would come with new animations and not just look like the previous versions. Not the case. They look exactly the same. I know a lot of people were upset about that because it seems like such an obvious thing to change when it comes to the visuals for this tree. And there are like so many other classes that got such cool animations for their stuff. Preheat, you got a whole nother phoenix.
You got a bird.
Yeah.
Dude, Mage has like some really cool stuff for sure. Mage does. Yeah.
You have Death Knights summoning a little army of men. There's so many different things.
Scale Commander calls the boys.
Yeah.
Yeah. So is there any way to like tell a demon is one or the other just by looking at them whenever you're just like passing by one on the target dummies in Orgrimmar or something like that?
I actually don't know if
honestly
people can see the Felscard.
I don't know.
I believe you can.
If Fellsguard
I'm
is
not
visible, then
100%
yes.
positive.
If not, then no. That's
I
literally
think
the
it's.
only way.
I think it depends on whether or not people have essential spell effects turned on, because I think it qualifies as an unessential spell effect. So if you have only essentials enabled, then you're not going to see it. No.
The
You know,
only way
it's-
to tell Eldrachi is by the absence of what makes Fellsguard unique. Like you
Yeah.
will never be able to see that glaive in most actual scenarios.
It's so weird because it would be so easy, right, to just make it a demon form just slightly more demonic, like they talked about, or to add like some sort of purpley glow effect.
And Blizzard
most of your
loves
abilities
they love their hue shifts on their things, right? Like how many mounts have just been hue
Yeah.
shifted. Just do that for those abilities, you know? It can't be
Yeah,
that
like
hard.
purple flame on all your abilities whenever you're revert.
Yeah.
That'd be sick, right?
Yeah, seems like an easy answer. So I don't know what happened there.
And it's important to note that the visuals can sell a bad tree, right?
100%.
I
100%.
I believe that Sun Fury got basically nuked to oblivion as far as the amount of damage it can do, right? Like Sun Fury is not even in the conversation for mages right now. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Well, so for fire, it still would be what you chose for raid, but fire in general is just nuked to the ground. It's not just one or the other. Yeah.
Yeah, but you'll still have people out there that will not play anything else than fire because they just love the visuals of Sun
Mhm.
Fury.
Yeah.
Like people are going to be sold entirely on the visuals. Well, you have two trees for Demon Hunter, and this might go for other classes too. I can't speak for Rogue. I can't speak for Feral, obviously. But you have two trees out there that one is extraordinarily weak, which is fine. That's just a tuning problem, but they've been reluctant to tune it. And the other enforces a gameplay loop that people don't enjoy. And neither one gives you a visual feedback that makes you feel like what you're doing is powerful. It's a minor thing, obviously, but people are going to notice that, and people are going to flock to classes based exclusively on the visual feast that class might actually provide them.
Yeah.
Yep.
Visuals are like definitely the most important part of this whole thing. If you're going to sell it, it needs to look cool. Like people want to see it look cool. It's probably more important than it playing well. I mean, obviously for me, I would care a lot more about if it plays well or not, right? But for most players, they just want to, they see something really cool. They're like, oh yeah, I should try that thing out.
Yeah,
So
Tim
we
comes
get
home
neither.
from work one day. Tim comes home to work from one day and decides, hey, I'm going to run my weekly 5 for Vault. He logs on his mage and plays Sun Fury. No, it's not the best, but he enjoys it because he's seeing all of the fire explosions and the extra bird and all the cool stuff, and he's having fun. He doesn't care that it's not optimal. He doesn't care that he's not topping meters. He's just enjoying what he's seeing.
It seems like there's a disconnect from what we were pitched at BlizzCon about what these hero talent trees were actually going to be, opposed to what we actually ended up getting. Because I felt like at BlizzCon, they were kind of pitched to us as not quite class skins, but something along those lines. A little less impactful, but are going to make your character visually unique in some way. And now, when we're on the other end of it, at least for Demon Hunter, it's the complete opposite. It's just all functional gameplay rather than visuals. I think it's just it's expectations were set and they weren't met, so people are quite upset about that. Do we want to move on to just quickly? We won't spend too much time on it, but the class / the spec tree. If there's any issues we want to touch on those.
Yeah,
I could spit on
there
this
really
forever.
only a couple. Well, there are a lot of things you can talk about, but it really boils down to kind of like 3 core issues, right?
Yeah.
On the class tree, and this is true of Vengeance too, and I think Vengeance has been suffering from this for a lot longer than Havoc has. There are way too many important traits at the very bottom of the class tree, and too many 2-point nodes. You have Sigil of Spite, you have the Hunt, you have Fell Devastation, you have Darkness, you have Rush of Chaos, you have the talent that gives you 2 points of mastery, right? You have all of these things, Quicken Sigils, Flames of Fury, all of these things are in the bottom of the tree. And there's a whole bunch of stuff at the top of the tree that you don't really care to take. But one thing that has been made obvious, especially with Eldrachi, because now you are having to talent Sigil of Spite, you are not always going to have the points for Darkness. If there is a fight out there that requires you to have Imprison and Sigil of Misery for crowd control purposes, for example, you can't take Darkness. There are too many other important damage talents at the bottom of the tree for you to take that prevent you from taking that button, which is really bad. I mean, I can't think of any other classes out there that don't have the points to spare for their raid cooldown.
why is Darkness a capstone at all?
I don't know.
It's a good question.
That's really weird.
It should be baseline.
They nerfed it and made it a capstone. It's actually 5 because it used to be 3 minutes. They nerfed it to 5 minutes. put it as a capstone, and then made us put another point into it if we wanted it to be back to 3 minutes, which is a theme that echoes throughout all the Demon Hunter trees in general.
Yeah, I like in general when it comes to the hero or not the hero talents, just the regular talent tree. Like I'm like super opposed to having a mixture of utility and throughput at the bottom in the capstone layer because that's where you have to make those tough decisions, and it's always going to just be we don't use the utility unless it's like survival is the only thing that matters. Damage doesn't matter, right? So Mythic Plus, right? But yeah, that's just it's a shitty decision to make, choosing between having more survivability and just slightly more throughput.
God forbid it comes to a point where we have to take Demon Muzzle, right? If we're ever doing like super high Mythic Plus and we need that little bit extra to survive, that's just another point that's like eaten up at the bottom of the tree.
It's actually much worse in Mythic Plus because you actually want those Felt Rush reduction talents because you're playing Inertia. In Raid, it's like you don't need the Felt Rush reduction talents because it's not like Felt Rush is a filler. That's like your least important filler spell, so you can kind of get away with it. But in Mythic Plus, like you need those talents, so it's like you have no wiggle room at all, and then like you just have way too much throughput and survivability throughout the entire tree, and there's not much choice outside of that. Now it offsets the downside because I don't think the tree itself really offers many interesting choices. There's like 2, but that's a different point. So you kind of feel it less, but there's just it's too full of things you need to take and not enough actual optionality.
Just to go back for a second for context for people that don't know Demon Hunter by heart, Demon Muzzle is the talent at the bottom of the tree after Soul Sigils that causes any targets that have been affected by your sigils to deal 8% reduced magic damage to you for a small window of time.
Yep.
So again, another survival talent at the bottom.
Yes.
The second issue comes out of the class tree and goes into the spec tree. There are so many random, boring, just damage amps that could just be thrown into the spec baseline. Like Demon Hide is just, it's what, like 3% or no, 5% more physical damage reduction and then an additional 3% magic damage. You've got Scars of Suffering, which just increases your versatility by 4% and reduces your threat generation by 8%, which, I mean, if the second half of that talent sounds strange to you, it's because they haven't wanted to reduce the threat mod on our abilities for some reason. They just want to give us a talent. All right, so you have a whole bunch of just random filler talents that are too critical to pass, so they're just points that you don't have to spend elsewhere, which I guess is fine. I think other classes suffer from this too, but it seems silly to have them there in the first place, if that makes sense.
I hate talents like this one. Improve Chaos Strike damage.
Yeah.
Increased by 10%.
Yeah.
Lame as
We have
shit.
a few of those.
Yeah, so lame.
Yep.
And the only reason we're even considering taking that is because we're pressing Chaos Strike so much in the War Within
1-1-2,
with Eldrazi
1-1-2,
Reaver.
1-1-2.
It's
The
30.
only reason.
Annihilation is 30% of our damage. Chaos Strike's like 8. So the button together is like 40% of our damage on a single target, roughly. So you just kind of have to take it. And there's other annoying, stupid little talents too. Like Chaos Transformation and Looks Can Kill used to be leveling passives that are really, in my opinion, boring. That we just take points in. Looks Can Kill, especially. I feel really bad about taking, and it's just kind of the general theme about like the top 2 gates of the Havoc tree, and this happens in a lot of other trees too. It's not just us, obviously. That just so many of these points are just like boring things you don't really see or feel that you kind of just have to pass through to get down to the good stuff. Like almost all of the interesting talents in Havoc's tree are in the bottom gate, and this has been true the entire life cycle. In our rework, I don't like calling it that, but in the rework, we had a lot of options down there. We had like 20 points, and all of them were impactful. So they just kind of combine them into choice nodes, but the issue is still there where basically everything that changes your rotation or changes what you're doing or impacts how you're playing is in the bottom gate.
And then, of course, to top it all off, there are the bugs that are still present. It was alluded to earlier, but Isolated Prey doesn't work. It buffs, I think, your Immolation aura, but it doesn't add the portion of it that is supposed to increase your I-Beam damage. Now, granted, I-Beam does 0 damage to begin with, so It's not a huge deal. But the fact that it's a bugged talent to begin with is frustrating, and it's not been bug fixed. The other one, of course, is the more controversial of the two, Know Your Enemy. It increases your critical strike damage by a portion of your critical strike chance. Going into Dragonflight, it was a 100% 1-to-1. You have 50% crit chance. Well, now your crits are doing 50% more damage. It got nerfed later in the expansion, not because it was overperforming, but because the talent itself is bugged, and it's affecting things that are not core to Havoc. So cantrip effects on ones, proc effects that might exist on things like the Toxic Thorn foot wraps, trinket effects. It's buffing those too. We pointed this out very early on. We were told, hey, that's probably going to be an expansion change. So we're at a new expansion and it hasn't been fixed and it's still nerfed. obviously I'm not complaining about the numbers again, but the fact that a talent that is supposed to increase our scaling is still nerfed because of a bug that hasn't been fixed is a bit frustrating. It's not the end of the world, but the fact that it's still there in the face of having, I think if you compile every single patch that has been pushed to the beta and alpha realms since the start of the War Within testing, Havoc's lines come down to, I think, one line of blue text.
There's a meme out there. Yeah, there's like
Yeah.
one or two.
Yeah. It's like we have all these bugs. Like, even if you don't want to tune us, there are a whole bunch of bugs that still exist that haven't been changed too. So that's why a lot of the Havoc players are kind of dooming right now, is because we can't even get bug fixes. Like,
On
what
the
am I supposed
topic
to do?
of know your enemy and that bug, it existing makes it the strongest point in our tree by far. I think like one point in that talent is stronger than like any other point in our tree, and they tried to add another one in our like 10.2 rework to kind of offset it with mastery and chaotic disposition. And then there's also cycle of hatred, which is our haste scaling. So all three of these nodes in the bottom of our tree are 2-point nodes, and they're all will allow us to actually scale with stats, and they're all like the most powerful points in our tree. So most builds for Havoc start with you going, okay, how many of these 2-point talents can I take? And working out from there. Like, Know Your Enemy is class warpingly strong. It is incredibly powerful with this bug, and it really, really limits what we can do with our talent tree. Same with Cycle and Chaotic Disposition to a lesser extent, but they're all just 2-pointers that we want to take because they're so strong.
Just to put Know Your Enemy into perspective, just so people understand, when we say that it can, increase the critical strike damage of trinkets, so like think Grief Torch, right? When your Grief Torch crits, that crit damage is getting amplified by this talent. Makes it do an insane amount. Beacon to the Beyond, when we were using that.
Yeah, that one.
It's
Yeah,
not even
that
just
one.
trinkets. So if you do
It's
Mob
everything.
Remix, this is why Demon Hunter does so much damage in
Yep.
Mob Remix, or one of the reasons is because all of your proc damage is getting multiplied by
All
this
of your
talent.
damage. Yep.
Yep.
Anything
Yes.
that can crit. And
Yeah,
that's-
actually, I spent like most of my hours on Mop Remix playing Demon Hunter, so that's like the extent of my understanding. But it's funny because the build that I found that because I was doing Sims on there, which by the way, you could do Sims for that. Who knew? I was playing Shattered Destiny actually, and I was just doing this Chaos Strike build. So kind of
Yeah.
similar to what you're talking
Yeah.
about right now. So I kind of feel the same uptime concerns already. Kind of tested that one out. But yeah, super strong because of that.
sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Voodoo.
You're good. I was almost done anyways. It's just those 3 2-point talents are so strong. I don't know if other specs are like this, where I think for the most part 2-point talents are relatively weak and they're more so for pathing or for limiting talent options. Ours are things where you actively want to take them because of how powerful they are, and it feels really bad that they're locked. They're basically locking us like that.
That sounds
Like,
cursed.
Yeah, our current top build only takes 2 capstones, but it takes all 6 2-point talents in the bottom gate.
That's so rough. Yeah, because I mean the 2-pointers are also way more boring. All of them across the board.
I
'Cause
hate
it's
2-pointers.
always the 2-pointers. They're always just like adds damage to something, right? It's never like changes something you do or gives you a new button.
That's
Yep.
exactly what they do. Just looking at them now.
Yeah, 2 of them are stat. Well, all 3 of them allow us to actually scale with scale with stats. Know Your Enemy's crit scaling, chaos disposition is mastery scaling. It's a random roll every time you do chaos damage or have it deal more damage. So it's just RNG, I guess. So is the critical strike stuff. And then Cycle of Hatred is just haste scaling, where you get CDR in your I beam, which in itself is a problem because it desyncs with Essence Break and causes you to just not want to play that talent. And throughout this expansion in War Within, whenever they've gone through and changed things, a lot of specs have gotten their non-deterministic CDR changed. Ice Cap, I think it was, for Frost Death Knights got changed. Demonologies, Warlocks got stuff changed. And I think it's frustrating that we have this still, and it causes you to just not want to play Essence Break at all because it causes horrible desync issues. But it's just still there, and it's a 2-point talent, and it's incredibly strong.
I think one of the more interesting things to also keep in mind, even Max is kind of pointed out that he doesn't like Demon Hunter going into War Within, but he's never been able necessarily to verbalize why. He has said multiple times, though, that the Season 3 tier set and Dragonfight almost makes the tree, right?
It kind of does, yeah.
Basically, every time you blade dance, you throw Glaive, which is cool. I mean, it's a great thing, and I'm sad it didn't appear in Eldrazi Reaver. I felt like it could have reasonably appeared in that hero tree, because it became so core to the class. But when the rework initially launched in 10.2, everyone thought that it was God's gift to Demon Hunter because we were doing so much damage, we were having fun, we had build variety. But it was really kind of that tier set that hid the, shall we say, the lingering problems that existed underneath. Because now you have to go back to manually throwing glaives. and that costs Fury because you're taking Furious throws.
And it costs
That-
GCDs, which need to be spent on Chaos Strike to get soul fragments.
Yeah.
Basically, it kills all
So-
the talents. Like, we're taking the talents with Reaver's Glaive, but we don't even want to throw the glaive. We just take them to buff up the random passive glaive. So the talents are essentially dead, and especially in single target. I don't know about AoE. I haven't done much dungeons, but it's a big glaring hole.
Yeah, but that would lead us down a rabbit hole that I think will take another hour of discussion, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's clear that there are problems that exist with the tree. So if we could even get the bugs fixed, I'm sure a lot of people would be a little bit more satisfied, but there are still problems there.
Now, speaking of bugs, Atrayen, there is a bug with any means necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Do you want to talk
Yeah.
about that?
There is. It was really only discovered during people forcibly testing Felscard the last time that there was raid testing. But it turns out the type of chaos damage that any means necessary converts your damage to can be parried. So when Demon Surge procs, an AoE spell effect that otherwise should not be parryable, it can be parried.
Yep.
Let that sink in.
So
What
for
spaghetti
people who don't
code
know
is
the
there?
chaos types, because you're like, how can a magic school be parried? There's really two types of chaos. There's the chaos that you think of for like Immolation Aura or I-Beam or stuff like that, the spell schools type. And there's a different chaos for First Blood, Chaos Strike, stuff like that, all the physical ones. The ones that don't have the physical attribute also don't have Holy for whatever reason. And for some reason, Any Means Necessary is turning stuff into the Holy and physical one, so it can be parried, which is weird. There's also the fact that as of right now, Hunt and Sigil of Spite are tagged as Chaos, but they weren't Chaos beforehand. They just got changed to Chaos. But they don't scale with our mastery unless we actually have the talent that's Any Means Necessary that converts them into Chaos. So it's like a third fake Chaos type where it's Chaos in name but doesn't actually act as Chaos.
Chaos in name only.
Yeah, I'm looking at it on Wowhead. It says school, and it just lists off all the different types instead of saying chaos here. Like fire, nature, frost, shadow, arcane.
So what abilities do we have now that are actually being converted with AMN?
Immolation Aura, Sigil of Spite, The Hunt,
Demon's
that is-
Blades,
Demon
Sigil of
Blades?
Flame,
Fell
Fell
Devastation.
Devastation, and Demon Surge.
So all
Yeah,
of
I
those
wasn't
that are
thinking of
being
Demon
converted, all of those are able to be parried?
Yes.
Demon Surge can. I'm pretty sure the rest of them can too, yeah.
Mm-hmm. It's not something you really think about all that often because, I mean, you don't look at the damage breakdowns of each ability.
This also affects Sigil of Silence. Wait, so does that mean that they could parry your silence?
We don't have silence, so I have no idea.
Yeah, that's a Vengeance Demon Hunter question.
Yeah,
good
I'm
question,
just
though.
wondering, like, kind of
Sounds
don't
pretty
think
through
important.
this.
Can tanks be parried?
So in Mythic
I don't
Plus, you
remember.
can't be parried except for by like the bosses that are bugged with that. So it's not really a concern in Mythic Plus, but since Silence has the interrupt property typically, I was thinking like, oh wait, has there ever been a case where we did Sigil of Silence on a boss and it actually got parried and it wasn't the guy missing their cooldown? Just a
I don't
random
know.
thought. But that seems very strange. And it's based on your position though, right? So like if you're
Yeah.
behind the boss, it wouldn't work, but if you're in front. So you're essentially adding this huge extra asterisk next to your damage saying like only if I'm behind, if I'm in front, this may actually be
Yeah, and
While
nice
you're fall
shirt.
rushing.
And do
Yeah.
recall that, I mean, even fell rushing aside, when you're progressing and sometimes in Heroic and a number of times in Mythic, there are a number of times where your raid has to be pixel stacked and the boss is
Yes.
facing you. So you as a melee don't have control as to whether or not you can be parried. Which, I mean, brings up the argument as to whether parry should exist as a mechanic in the all, but that, again, is another can of worms. Like, imagine if spellcasters still had to deal with the opportunity for bosses to resist their spells if they were in front of them. It'd go nuts.
I remember that being a thing on Mythic Sylvanas Prague because she's, a human character or whatever, and she can parry you, and you're standing right in front of her. If we got, I believe we got parried on our Fellblade in our opener, we'd get so screwed because we would just be standing there doing nothing, waiting for Fury.
Essence
Fury.
Break can be parried, I'm pretty sure, and it doesn't.
Yeah,
it just doesn't
it can be
apply.
parried too.
Yep.
It just doesn't
It can be
apply if it's parried.
Insane.
Ask me how I
Insane.
know. Not just that, recent testing. I think it was
Yeah, everything basically.
Nexus
Yeah,
Princess that I was testing, and I Essence
Yeah.
Break, and
Yeah, I was thinking of the bosses we've recently tested, which already did not seem very melee friendly at all
Nope.
to start off with. And a bunch of them were just dashing around the room like crazy.
I have the clip
Good thing we
pulled
don't have
off
a rage
of Nexus Princess, and you can see how chaotic it is. Just being as a melee, having to fell rush around, vengeful retreat. On top of dodge, all of these lines that are being aimed all over the place, it's absolutely just a headache. And I think we have it a little bit worse off than other melee specs. Like, I'm sure we're all sharing in the same pain, as, you know, hard as it is to dodge things as melee, but Havoc just has it a little bit worse because we have a couple extra things to keep in the back of our mind when we're trying to do these.
I don't know who necessarily has it worse, but I can tell you who has it the best. Screw those paladins, guys.
Come on, man.
They still have ranged melee range.
Yeah.
Oh, really? Dude.
Yeah, 20
Paladins-
yards.
Okay, I have a bone to pick with paladins too, because you know what? Half their abilities are longer ranged than evoker abilities. What the hell? How is a melee having more range than a range, dude? It doesn't make sense.
My preservation friend has the exact same
It's
feel.
crazy.
It's insane.
They're getting away with it. It's insane. We have to stop them. Yeah, something must be done.
On that note, how can we fix the problems that Havoc is having right now? Realistically, like, we can't just say, okay, scrap both hero talents. Let's start over.
No reworks.
Yeah.
No reworks. Work within the context of what currently exists.
Yeah.
Okay, I have three things for Eldrazi that I think would make it better, but I don't know if it would fix it.
Okay.
The
Go
first
for
one
it.
is either add some way to suck up souls like Vengeance has,
Yes.
or change it to be souls generated. Either of those
Yeah.
would do the same thing, basically. You could put it on Chaos Strike, Fell Rush, just some low CD ability that can suck the souls in. The second thing is you have to break the insane uptime stuff that having both Reaver's Mark and Throw the Fight has. There's a few ways you could do it. I think having Reaver's Mark just go away completely and changing the Chaos Strike thing to just be a large single target Chaos Strike, like not from Chaos Strike, but similar to how the Blade Dancing power is just extra slashes. Have the Chaos Strike one be like just a huge explosion. There's an opportunity to add visuals there. That would fix that completely. And then have Throw the Fight just happen whenever you use Reaver's Glaive instead of at the end of the combo. That would, in my opinion, make it more reasonable and would solve kind of the double dipping of the buff stuff while still keeping the same like feel of actually having that buff stuff and like mattering a little bit. Because some of it's fine. I think it's just when we have this many overlapping things that kind of gets problematic.
For Reaver's Mark, if it was going to do damage instead of a damage amp, it would have to scale with something though, right? Because if it was just a flat number, not scaling off of anything, that number would
Well, it scales
eventually
with attack power, same as what the other one does. Yeah,
Okay.
it would just be like how the Blade Dancing power is AoE slashes, have the Chaos Strike and power be single target damage.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I'm surprised that this hero talent just doesn't come with like a passive where like souls slowly find their way back to you. And then all it would take is just them adding like stacks to certain things to go over whatever the cap is that they're saying. Make it work similar to splinters, where it's every time you get 8 splinters, it procs something. But if you go over 8, it wouldn't hurt you if you were not to press the spell before it went off, right? Like you still get the value. Also on Warblade's Hunger, like having it be a buff for a period of time, not just the one cast. That's just so weird.
I don't think Blizzard actively thought about the Souls mechanic when they were creating Eldrazi Reaver, because if you remember, the artifact for Vengeance back in Legion was the Eldrazi Warglaives. So a lot of people, when they heard Eldrazi, were thinking, hey, this probably going to be the better tree for Vengeance. But as it turns out, Vengeance doesn't like it much either, because they don't like having to weave Throglaive into their abilities rotationally. They just don't enjoy having to do that.
For what it's worth, they also have similar, like basically the same issues. I mean, the souls are much more workable, but Eldrazi is just overwhelmingly strong for them as well, to the point where Felskard is never taking a raid and not really a reason to take it in M+ either, although it's much closer than it is for Havoc.
Yeah, I think change number one, the most critical core fix that needs to happen for Eldrazi Reaver is that Havoc needs some way to collect souls that are across the room. Like that's just it. Once that happens, we can talk about everything else. But right now, that's the most frustrating part of it. I think I have a clip on my Twitch of me. It's the third boss? I think it's the third boss of the new raid, where there's a whole bunch of spell effects going on because he's casting his ability to break all of the images that are still remaining on the platform. One of my soul fragments goes wide into one of the void puddles. I don't see it until after the boss has started moving, and I know I can't go back for it because I need uptime. But I'm also thinking in the back of my head, man, that sucks. That's a Reaver's Glaive right there.
Yep, I have the clip.
So,
I'm playing it right now, so you can see it.
Yeah. I think it's in when the boss finishes the cast, if you look in the bottom left-hand corner of the screen, you'll see that little faint green orb.
Yep.
That is my soul fragment. I see it when the fight is happening, but I can't go back for it. The boss has already moved.
Yep, and that would totally be solved if we just had some way to bring them in to us.
Mhm.
They could even make it souls generated instead, and then all this is fixed, and it's so much easier than adding the thing to Havoc. But we'd
Yeah.
still want to pick up souls because they give us Fury, but it would be a quick band-aid fix for the tree.
Yeah, I don't know if it needs to be a separate ability or if it's just like every Chaos Strike pulls in a Soul Fragment near you, or Blade Dance pulls in all. I've been told that having it be Blade Dance would be bad for PvPers, but I don't PvP enough to know for sure. Yeah, that's Eldraki Reaver. Felskard's even simpler, really. You can do it in as much as 3 tuning knobs. Knob 1, buff Demon Surge damage by no less than 100%, so that it's actually on your damage meter. Step 2, change Focused Hatred to not be conditional upon it being a single target, but to just always be active on your primary target. Step 3, Demonic Intensity, make the empowered I-Beam that you get and the empowered Sigil of Flame that you get off of that talent do significantly more damage. I don't want to touch Consuming Fire, obviously, because Immolation Aura does good damage already on its own.
Mhm.
And it feeds into Ragefire, and we don't want to feed the same problem we had last expansion where we Ragefire, blow up an entire pack, and make everyone else upset. So Consuming Fire is fine. I-Beam on its own does not do damage, so buffing 0 by 30% is still 0. Make Abyssal Gaze do 130% of I-Beam's damage, so it actually registers on meters, same with Sigil of Doom. Right? 3 fixes, 3 tuning knobs. It's playable, you have a choice. It's not bad. You play other specs with it. You can have a little bit more wiggle room with what build you want to play. There are some other minor tweaks I'd make to Felskard. These aren't critical, but as we talked about earlier, having 2 talents that buff you outside of demon form, let's just call it your human form, seems overkill. I think having 1 is probably fine, but having 2 seems a little bit much. I would change Monster Rising, the agility increase while not in demon form, to be a more significant agility increase when you cast Metamorphosis. And I put emphasis on cast Metamorphosis so that it is only tied to the cooldown and not to demonic. I would change Burning Blades from being a damage over time effect. I don't know why it's a damage over time effect. We already have Trail of Ruin and Soul Scar. Adding a third one on top of it seems unnecessary. And then Tethered Fury. Maximum Fury increased by 50. Okay.
What purpose
What are
is
we
that
supposed
serving?
to do with that?
Yeah.
You can Fel Barrage easier.
Yeah, I guess you can pull for Fel Barrage easier, but
You're
aside
not
from
playing
that,
that, but you could.
what's it for? What's the point?
I
Right.
think a lot of the Felskard passive talents are kind of just like, what is this for? What's the point? And I think that, like, aside from just buffing the numbers up and actually making it do damage, which is the primary issue with it, to go in and fix it, I think is just, you got to add a little extra spice to those. Like, Burning Blades isn't a great node, but it's basically just like a 10% increase to 3 talents. But the way it does it is a little bit more interesting. Like, just having like 50 extra Fury or 5% extra agility or whatever the other one is, 5% Chaos Strike damage. Like, you don't feel it, you don't notice that, and it's really boring and just kind of a super easy passive. And like Atrayen said, having 1 of those is fine, or 2 of those is, but like we have 4 of those on the tree basically. So it's just a lot of things that don't do much is kind of Felskard's issue.
The Burning Blades damage, is this like a Ignite builder, kind of like...
Yeah, same
Yep.
thing. It stacks up.
Okay. You gotta watch out for these talents too, because if there's ever a Season 4 and they reintroduce old content, this will break. 100%. It doesn't work with their scaling. This is what
Wouldn't
Dev
shock
tier
me
set
at
had.
all.
In Season 4, the Dev tier set broke not once, but twice.
Oh, I remember that, yeah.
And it's because it had this effect. Because the scaling doesn't work properly with how they do it for damage accumulators such as this. So
Yeah, I mean,
just something to keep your eye on.
Yeah,
Yeah,
we've had
and it's
issues where
also
it was
super
double
minor.
dipping with like verse and stuff. I remember season 1, it was double dipping. The throw glaive damage would be affected by verse, and then the soul scar damage also would be affected by verse.
Mhm. Yeah.
And I mean, it's also super minor, but the more damage over time effects you add, especially ones that stack up, the more likely you can get screwed over if a boss has an immunity phase or a heavy DR phase. Like, you've stacked up all this damage, it's not doing anything because it's ticking either into something that reduces it down to 1 damage every tick, or it just gets removed. I think having it front loaded is a cleaner solution.
So would we need to also reduce the stacking multipliers on Eldraki to keep Felskard competitive?
I think that's a given.
You could buff Felskard to the moon, but then we're just in kind of the same problem area.
Yeah.
Eldraki,
Yeah,
if Eldraki and Felskard are ever equal, Eldraki is just going to bring much more priority as well. If you're ever playing an Mythic Plus thing, like Felskard is, I guess, supposed to be that kind of AoE burst, but Eldraki is just significantly like more single target unless they really kill it and really buff up Felskard. So like it's just really tough for them to kind of balance these against each other just in the way they are. And that's not even touching on the defensive benefits as well. Eldrazi has one defensive node that's just way better than Felskard. Felskard's best one is a 5% stagger, which is like sounds pretty good, but Eldrazi gives you a 10% on-demand DR or a stacking shield every soul you consume, and those are both just much more valuable than the 5% stagger.
Yeah, and that's not even factoring in how Eldrazi Havoc would be balanced relative to other specs, because like we were talking about at the very beginning, it's way overtuned relative to every other class in the game. If it's supposed to give us a 20 to 30% amp, it is far beyond that point. So it's not really a question of if Eldrazi Reaver is going to be nerfed. It's a question of when will it be nerfed and how will they nerf it.
Cool. Yeah, sounds like it's a mess. So
How do you feel about the prospect of in high keys having to hold your Fellblade for the?
We already hold blade.
Insta-gib?
That's fine.
yeah,
Okay.
we have.
Yeah,
I mean,
so holding
it's-
Spellblade is like pretty insignificant. We already hold much more impactful buttons like Meta or like Blade Dance in order to live things.
And plus, I mean, there's also we generate a lot of fury without Fellblade anyway, so it's not crippling.
We basically don't need any of our Fury generators with Eldrazi because of the souls we generate.
It is a good point though to bring up that 3 of our kind of rotational buttons are used as defensives. Like we have
Oh yeah, it sucks.
Blade Dance, we have Fellblade, and I guess Meta you could count as like a rotational thing, cooldown.
Yeah, and on
Um,
top of that, if you have Demon Muzzle, you're putting down your Sigil too for a little less damage, and then your Fellblading, it's like you're doing like 4 globals to take less damage there.
I don't know if they would all last long enough for you to be able to stack all of them.
You just need them for that
No.
1 second. No, you wouldn't stack everything. I'm just saying, like, if
You
you do
could
have to
stack
stack more than one.
You could stack everything but Meta, but you'd have to. It'd be very precise. It'd
Yeah.
be like 1 second of overlap.
Yeah.
Just
Yeah.
looking at it, you're not even close, and you're like, oh my god, are you serious? Like,
One more bug to mention before we wrap up here. I think this was discovered the other day. Thrill of the Fight is supposed to have a healing increase aspect to it.
Oh right,
It's
yeah, it just
not
doesn't do
healing
it.
at all.
Alright.
It's supposed to increase damage damage and healing by 30% for 10 seconds. The healing just isn't happening, even for Vengeance. So just something to bring attention to.
That's Havoc.
Yeah, that's Havoc in a nutshell. Just doesn't work. Everything's broken.
Probably
okay.
for other classes too.
Let's.
Yeah, enhancements down bad right now.
Poor word up.
Yeah, he's struggling. He's struggling. that
yeah,
guy.
it really feels like the clock's ticking. We don't have that much more time until the War Within's coming out. There's a lot of specs that are feeling like this, right?
Mm-hmm.
Listen, I'm not gonna say it's Mage's fault, but we did get like
I am.
new
I'll say it.
talents
I'll go there.
we did get new talents every week for 5 weeks, and
Yeah.
a couple reworks.
For the
and-
second time.
but it was time well spent.
Yeah,
good
I'm
class.
glad
It's gonna be a lot of fun.
you're enjoying it.
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, you literally have a spell called Blizzard, so if you're not the hero class of World of Warcraft,
That
I
is
don't know
true.
who else
There it
is.
is. So today's Warcraft Workshop UI improvement is going to be MySlot. This is going to be a tool that makes it a lot easier to set up characters on the beta. This is primarily where I use it, but I also use it sometimes on the PTR and even live. The purpose of this add-on is that it allows you to basically take your setup. So that's going to be your keybinds, your macros, where all the abilities are placed on your action bars. It allows you to export this, and then you can import it onto whichever character you're looking to play. So let's say, for instance, I'm a dwarf on the beta, and I don't want to be a dwarf anymore. I want to be a mechanome because it's going to be more damage for me. What I'm going to do is slash MySlot in the chat. That's going to open up this little box here. And then all I have to do is click export, and it's going to give me this giant block of text. Now, all I need to do here is just copy this text. It'll automatically be selected for me. And then now that I have it, I just need to log into my new character. Okay, so just to demonstrate, here is my mechanome, and I am making just a fresh mage. All right, so we've turned on MySlot. We're ready to go. Let's sign in. So in order for this to work, you will actually need the abilities themselves, because it can't place the abilities on your bar if you don't have them. All right, so now that I have added in all of my talents, so I actually have the ability to add those abilities, I'm going to turn on the ability bars here, and then I'm going to type /MySlot. That's going to open up this box, and I'm going to paste in the string from before, and I'm going to click import. It's going to ask me, am I sure? I click yes here. And now, the bars may not be in the exact same space, but they do have the correct abilities. What I need to do here is just go into edit mode and choose my beta layout. And boom, we have it just like we had it before. Now, keep in mind, there are some abilities that did not carry over. Those are consumables that were here. Again, stuff that you don't have access to. So that's going to be like consumables, talents, all that stuff. If you don't have it on your character, it's not going to work. So I definitely recommend, if you're doing this on the beta, that you first make sure to talent in your talents, and then also get your consumables, any other items you might need. And then after you're done with that, that is where you would use MySlot. In this example, I used 2 beta characters, but just know that you can also do this from live to beta. But obviously, again, you need to have the abilities or else this isn't going to work. But hopefully this makes it a lot quicker for you to get characters spun up on the PTR next time you need to play that, or if you want to play the beta. So yeah, that's going to be it for today's UI improvement. So if you have any other notes or any other things that are kind of similar to this, and you want to include those, make sure you add a comment below. And hopefully this helps.
Okay, before we wrap up here, let's just move on to a couple fun questions to put a bow on this episode. We're going to go around the table here, and everyone's going to answer. If you're forced to abandon your main and re-roll to a different class, what would it be? Preheat, you go first.
I'm doing that, so it's already happening.
You're already doing that?
Mage, I'm going from Evoker to Mage back, yeah.
Wait a minute.
He's going back.
Wait a minute.
Going from one main to
Wait
another.
a minute. Okay.
Okay, I have to choose a new one?
Yeah.
Okay, so I have to choose a new one. I mean, I like Demon Hunter, it's fun, but you're not really selling it to me in this
Don't do it.
episode, I'll be honest with you.
It.
Good.
You're not,
If we're not selling it, we're doing our job.
Yeah. I think I'd probably do Hunter. I've always played Hunter as an ult, so either that or Ret Pally. Ret Pally's just like, pff, come on, dude. What do they have everything. It's crazy.
They do.
Again,
No,
all your abilities 20, 30 yards. It's insane. Oh, we're reducing melee range. Oh, who cares? You know, I can just throw out my spells from
It's
wherever. I'm
spell
just missing
range,
Crusading
not melee
Strikes.
range.
Right, exactly.
That's how they
Crusading
worded it.
Strikes is all you're missing.
I mean, to be fair, I mean, if you re-roll to Ret in time, you're probably going to get the next 2-hand strength legendary because they're overdue one, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
They'll
They haven't
definitely
had
add
one in
another
like a whole
too.
tier.
Yeah.
Preheat, would you go Survival Hunter, the new survival rework, or?
No, I mean, I'm
Well,
sure
I
it's
would.
fun.
That's
but
my
I
answer.
wouldn't. I'm not. Look. If I'm playing a melee, it's got to be a ranged melee. So it's like a fake melee, and that's Ret.
All right, Voodoo, you said you're going
Yeah,
survival?
survival. I mean, I already said it. I love new survival. It's so fun. It's just it's so much fun. If I didn't do survival, probably like Ellie Shaman, I guess. I don't know. All my picks are weird niche cases, but they got, I don't know. I've just always liked those two. But here we are in Havoc.
Do you think you could make content on Ellie Shaman? Would it
No.
be? Would it be popular enough?
I'm planning on making some survival content, but
Yeah.
I don't think I could do Ellie content. It's too different from what I've already been doing.
What about Atrayen?
A long time ago, I used to play Death Knight. I'd probably just go back.
Really,
DPS
y'all are
Death Knight?
passing on
Frost.
Mage right now, and you're talking about how overpowered this. Just
Look,
join us,
okay,
man. Come
Mage
on,
is
man.
like
Beat
it's
us.
like when you go to be like the child of a hedge fund manager. It's like you're just skipping everything. There's no struggle.
Yeah, we're Nepo babies. We love it. It's great. You should try it.
That was actually
I'll
going to
be
be
honest.
my. Yeah, go ahead.
I have tried Mage. I just don't think the ranged play style is for me.
That's fair. I feel the same way about melee, so that's totally fair.
Yeah, I'm kind of stuck on melee these days. I find range. I just can't do it.
Well,
I'm
if I
just
told
pressing
you
80
optimal
too
mage
much.
gameplay is in melee, though.
Oh,
I'm
Does that change
back
your
in.
Oh,
Nepo baby me up. I'm back in.
unless you're swinging that staff, he's not sold.
So
Good
for
point.
real, it is. It is like Arcane is all based on impacts, and you're reacting. You're clipping your missiles for procs or like for charges. So you'd want to be like point blank.
okay.
You can.
All right. Maybe Mage is on the table.
there white
Can I AD?
Yeah, you're fully mobile. You got like a casting go every
All
once
right.
in a while, but you're
All
just.
right. I changed
yeah.
my answer. I'm a Mage
We're
now.
BM hunters
Yeah.
now. Yeah.
I'm in.
Hell
Let's
yeah.
go Arcane. Let's do an
Right.
Arcane podcast next. I just want something simple. I'm tired of this. I'm tired of this like 4D chess for every encounter, every raid boss, every Mythic Plus dungeon. Just
But the
over it.
secret cabal wants that.
No, we don't. We really don't, guys. I swear. Next question. Favorite and least favorite raid boss from Dragonflight?
I'll go. I hated Council of Dreams. That was my least favorite boss by a mile.
That boss sucks.
Every time I went into it, I dreaded it. If I had to be a duck, I guess this actually was a little bit better because I didn't have to do any mechanics. But I just did not enjoy it at all.
Were you ever the designated duck person?
We spun a wheel each week on Reclear.
Okay.
Yeah, so I had to do it once.
I was gonna say it's not usually a Havoc job, but
No, we spun the wheel. It was a little.
gotcha.
Favorite boss is probably Rashok. I think like Prague Rashok. Just that kind of like really tight ending, kind of sludge fist as single target, just hard check Patrick fight is just really enjoyable for me.
I'm going
Next.
to also say Council of Dreams is my least favorite boss of Dragonflight if I'm allowed to copy answers. If not, give me a couple more seconds to... no.
Oh, you can copy.
If I'm allowed to copy, it's Council of Dreams. If I'm not allowed to copy, it's Senarth.
Okay.
For very obvious reasons, if you understand how that Demon Hunter damage works.
Okay.
As far as my favorite boss, I'm gonna go with Farak. I got to be one of the Fire Seed carriers on Farak Prog, and I thought that was one of the more fun experiences I've had on a Prog boss because it legitimately felt like I was contributing more than just pressing buttons and doing damage. I had to play well, and I can proudly say, as a Havoc player, I never once wiped the raid with Seed on Prog, which made me feel pretty good.
That's a rare occurrence. Not for you, but just Havocs in general. Like,
No, for
Havocs
him,
are always a liability.
Let's throw him under the bus.
Yeah, I mean, wasn't there was a big clip going around. It was when Liquid wiped it, like 0.2% on Farak or something, and everyone was dissecting the clip, and they thought it was the one guy not pressing his boss button, but it turned out to be Shakib over in the corner or something, and it's like, oh, that's not a good look for Demon Hunters.
Classic Demon Hunter activity right there.
There's been a lot of that.
I raided in a 6-hour guild. We're like one of the top 6-hour guilds. So we got there right after they made it. So the seeds didn't really matter anymore. So I never had to do it.
Nice. All right, Preheat, your turn.
Yeah, so I mean, Council is obviously the worst fight. And in design, like it's not even an opinion, it's a fact. Like that fight is just bad, but it's not actually my least favorite, believe it or not. There's one that's worse. If you play Evoker and you did Nimue or Nimue, whatever you want to call it, that piece of shit, okay?
Ooh.
That boss's hitbox is broken. And we reported it in beta. We said, yo, you got a big boss here. It's got the hitbox of a critter. Like, what's going on here? You got Volcaros literally down the hall where you can hit the boss from anywhere in the room, 20 yards. It's totally fine. But Nimue, if you have to be on the boss to like hit it, right? And as a caster, normally this is fine. Like you play Mage or Boomkin, Hunter, whatever, it's totally fine. But if you play Evoker specifically, all of the soaks are literally pixel perfect right at your max range. So you have to basically play the whole fight like being right on the border of your max range, which is really annoying because there's stuff constantly coming at you. You're also punished for doing the mechanics in that fight. So if you soak a seed, you then gain the benefit of having a circle spawn under you that you now have to move out of, right? Yep. The little grass on the ground.
Yep.
And also there's no way to track who is soaking how much. So you can also get away with just not doing that mechanic and making other people suffer more for it. I think just everything about that fight just kind of rubs me the wrong way, but especially the range thing. I swear to God, if you ever do that as Evoker, you will have a completely different perspective on that fight.
The red flower melee had to soak is just outside of melee range of the boss. So if you don't have an extended melee range, like Havoc doesn't, you basically you have to be pixel perfect to even be able to hit it while you're soaking the red flower. So I get it. That whole wing just sucks.
Yeah, and it would be so easy for them to just make the hitbox slightly bigger on the boss, and it would solve all these issues. But of course, the boss just like went live with the critter hitbox. My favorite fight though. That's tough because I like a lot of the end bosses. I've liked Rezaget, I liked Sarkareth, I liked Ferric to a certain extent, but I think my favorite was Tendril pre-nerf because it just was so intense and there were so many funny ways to wipe really quick. I like a quick fight like that, and also Dev was really good on that fight, so it's a little bit because my class was really good at doing damage on it too. That was like the only fight you could justify playing Devastation during progression instead of Augmentation.
Do you remember how many pulls it took you pre-nerf?
So the majority of our pulls were after one of the nerfs, but not the second one. And then they basically nerfed it. The big nerf happened like right at the end of our progression, right before we killed the boss. And it felt kind of lame because we had just like gotten it down and then they nerfed it. I don't remember exactly how many pulls, but I know it was like somewhere in the 200 range, somewhere around there. Yeah, I'd have to look it up. But I had a lot of fun.
That's nothing for us
awesome.
Scrub guilds. 200 is like normal.
We were just into P2 Prog when they did the massive nerf, and then I think we killed it like 50 pulls later.
Yeah.
Or like I think we like two-shot the last phase after the massive nerfs. Like it was crazy, the night and day difference.
I'm gonna get you the exact number.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay.
It was, I had a lot of fun on that one.
I expect a kind of a lower number from like a guild that you're in.
So at the time I was raiding on EU in a 3-day guild, and we were like, I think we ended the tier 50, world 57th. So not too bad, but not like really good either. But yeah, I'll tell you how many wipes in just a little bit.
I'm trying not to throw my guild under the bus and say how long it took us, but it was more than 200.
I believe that we killed it before the second big nerf with the guild that I was in at the time. And according to Warcraft logs, our official pull count was 342.
Okay, so the official count it took us on Tindril was 275, and yeah, most of those were P2 wipes.
Cool.
We had only 57 on Smolder on 275 on that one. Ferric was 245. That's including resets though, so that number's a little inflated. But yeah,
Gamers.
dude. Also, it includes like tanks doing that thing, where they don't
Yeah,
suck the first mushroom and then
Yep.
you wipe like 5 seconds into the pull. A lot
Yep.
of those. Yeah.
Yep.
I got our number. Ours was 317.
I'm not going to
We
look
had
up my
a-
number.
We had a
Tired.
number of tragic tank problems early on.
Mushrooms.
So relatable.
Okay. My answer to that question, favorite. This is going to be probably a controversial choice for my favorite, but I really liked Razageth. I feel like it was really fun towards the end of Prague when we all just knew exactly how to move, how to like do everything. We were like little army ants moving. We had this like strat that I think either Liquid or Echo did early on and then they abandoned it, but we just kept it the whole time in P2, where you go into like individual lines on the 4 corners, and then you have a weak aura that tells you which direction to go and where to stack, and someone would get inversion and they'd run a certain way and the rest of the team would go the other way. It was like so coordinated, and it just felt like really fun to pull that off. And I don't know, I like that one. I enjoyed doing it last week when we had Awakened.
Awaken, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've been talking about that strat actually in my guild, because we were doing the strat that they did now, and I think it's just strictly worse than the strat before with the more coordination with the lines.
Yeah. It's not
We had
hard
like
to
a couple
do.
incidents and we were looking into maybe swapping it over. So yeah, we might be trying it out.
Yeah. Least favorite boss, again, I'm going to say Council. And I think that just should speak volumes. Any like encounter designers that might be watching or any devs that could pass on the message, take note that all 4 of us, it might not have been everyone's like least favorite, but we all had negative things to say about that encounter. So
Well, it was 3
hopefully
out of
we
4
don't-
least favorites.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
Well,
the
no,
other
I-
least
3 and
favorite
4.
was the same boss in the wing.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
not my least favorite, but it is the worst fight.
Yes.
I acknowledge
Yeah.
that.
Hopefully we don't see that again in the War Within.
I think it's fine for it to be kind of a meme on Heroic, but like Mythic Council is just like, what are y'all cooking?
Mhm.
Stop. Don't do that. Ever
Kitchen's on
again.
fire.
Stop cooking.
Yeah. Never again.
My guild went into progressing Council of Dreams pre-tilted about the fight, and so it took them like 40 people to kill it instead of like the 20 that it should have taken, because they wiped it like 1% on pull 20, and then they tilted and doubled their pull count.
Yeah. We had some moments where
Dude, the worst
names
is
were
when
called.
the absolute worst is the sleep is about to happen and you see a duck running for the last pool and you're like calming like, yo, get away from that pool. Do not soak that pool. And the duck,
Mhm.
sure enough, right as you're about to have the boss do the mechanic, soaks the last pool, and then it's just a wipe and you're like 6 minutes in and it's just
They
a
don't just
complete waste of your time.
soak it; they use their jump to go through.
Yeah, they like
it.
hop into it. Yeah. No. It's
Yeah.
like watching a car crash in slow motion. Can't do anything about it. Yeah, that's a big tilter. I hate that boss. Like still to this day, every week we do it. I dread that fight.
Nothing with
I'm
that
not looking
boss is
forward to
fun.
it. Yeah, nothing.
Yep.
Bad fight.
Getting cleaved by the bear. Awesome.
Oh,
Great times.
yeah.
Okay, last question. Have you ever lied to get out of an IRL commitment just to play WoW? I'll give you guys time to think.
I can answer this. So
Okay.
my answer is no. I plan around it pretty well, but I have a small anecdote that's sort of similar to this. So I'm going with my girlfriend on a little trip at the end of August, and it was planned originally for the pre-release weekend. So I had to convince her, but it hasn't been like super, like nothing's been purchased yet, but I managed to get it moved, and that's like the closest I've been to having to do that.
This man has his priorities straight.
Does it count if you're like saying that you're sick at work? Because I'm pretty sure everyone's done that for an expansion release, right?
Yep.
Like,
Oh, okay, never mind. I guess that counts. I lied and said I was going to a conference when I was working at one job to not go. So I guess that actually counts.
I have never done that, believe it or not.
you've never called in sick for a video game?
No.
Wow.
No, I have not.
That honestly,
Um,
that's a great way to live your life. You're a great example
An
of
honest
gamers.
man.
Yeah.
I have lied to get out of real life, like whether it's a party or something, but I didn't do it to play WoW. But I'm pretty sure everyone's done that at least once. I just wasn't being social that night, you know? If I ended up on WoW later that night, you know, that's a coincidence, but I never intentionally did that.
Yeah, of
Yeah,
course.
just by chance.
Oh, my hand slipped and I logged into World of Warcraft.
Yeah, right.
Oh no, I turned my
Oh,
computer
what's
on by
that? I
accident.
forgot I need to do
Oops.
one more mythic key so I can max out my vault for the week. Oops. guess I'm logging on.
It's happened. It happens to the best of us, honestly.
I was in a relationship a while ago, years ago, and we were mid argument, mid fight. Things were getting pretty serious, and I had to leave. I had to go raid. My team was waiting for me.
Sorry, babe. Hold that thought. I gotta go kill a boss. We're like 80%
really not
just hold, pause.
Yeah.
I'll be right back.
I should have stayed. In hindsight, I should have said, "Okay, this is more important. Let me deal with the matter at hand." But I had to go.
Oops.
I called an Uber and I went home and I raided. And the relationship didn't last.
You were not.
Were you still a streamer back then?
Mhm.
Or were you trying to break into it? Oh, did you stream that too?
It was during Sanctum of Domination. No, Sepulchre.
Oh no.
Yeah.
That wasn't even that long ago. That's 2 years ago.
Yeah, I said a couple years. Yeah.
Yeah, that was a couple years ago.
Anyways, that's my shameful moment. Okay, I think we can wrap it up now. Anyone have anything else they want to add about the hero talent trees?
Double check any talent that says you get reduced damage taken. Make sure that's actually happening.
Yes.
Good call.
Because there's the Shaman example. Everyone knows that one, right? But also anything that says a proc chance is increasing. Make sure you check those too. It turns out that the arcane one that says it gives us more clear casting actually reduces our clear casting. So we had an
attack speed buff that lowered our attack power, so it was a net negative. But they ended up fixing that.
Yeah.
And I remember it was Shadowlands. There was a conduit that you could take that increased the amount of magic damage that your tattoos reduced, and it was a negative damage reduction addition. So it actually increased the amount of magic damage we took.
Yep.
It was only there for like a week, but it sucked.
2 more things we can point out just before we wrap up that's wrong with Havoc. One is, I think this is still a problem on beta in the War Within. Collective Anguish has been using the wrong version of Feldev since the start of Dragonflight.
It's still there.
Yeah.
So
it's using the Vengeance version. So
Yeah,
every time you buff Vengeance,
two
you're buffing
versions.
Havoc.
Yes. So hopefully they fix that. Somebody hears that, and they fix that. The other thing, there was something else. Oh, we got a PvP nerf on retail not
That's
too long
fixed
ago.
on beta.
It's fixed on beta, not fixed on retail. We still have some time to play in retail. So if any devs are listening, PvP nerf happened, 4% in PvP. It also affected PvE. There was code put in to have it not affect PvE, but one little variable is off and it's negating the whole thing. So Havoc took a stray, and we have a 4% nerf in PvE for no reason. So if anyone could fix that, that'd be great.
Fixed on beta, by the way, just not on live.
Yeah, so they've acknowledged it exists. They just won't fix it on retail.
You just gotta wait like months for it to be fixed. Yeah.
Train, didn't you get that changed? Wasn't it because of you?
I don't want to attribute it to myself, but one thing I will say, it might not actually be fixed on beta, because think about it. They've zeroed out all the auras. They've zeroed out all the auras that exist for classes, or at least they've done that for most. So if they zeroed out our aura, yes, it's fixed, but the problem's still there.
Yeah.
I don't think they zeroed out our aura yet, though. Have they? I think they just did Vengeance.
I don't know that one,
sure.
which is why I'm saying it may or may not be fixed.
All right, guys. Thank you for joining us today. It's been fun. Voodoo, where can people find you on the interwebs?
Yeah, I mean, you can find me on YouTube at Voodoosaurus. I'm the smaller, younger version of Jedith with worse hair. And I also stream on Twitch sometimes a week at Voodoosaurus as well. And I have a Twitter, and you can find me all there. I'm very active in the Havoc Discord as well, helping people out. And yeah.
Okay. Atrayen, where can they find you?
Mostly on Twitch at Atrayen. I sometimes stream. It's probably going to be progression and maybe a couple keys. I'm not like a serious content creator or anything. I also have a Twitter at AtrayenWow. Again, I barely use it, so follow me at your own discretion.
Sounds good. And just for the people watching the podcast, if you do feel that you need to, if you're a better listener than you are a watcher, you can find our podcast on Spotify. Episodes are uploaded relatively quickly, usually before the episode goes up on YouTube. So make sure you follow us on Spotify to get the episode before all those YouTube kids do. Yeah, I think that's it. We can wrap it up here. Thank you so much, guys, for hanging out today, and catch you next time.
All right. Thanks for coming, guys. Appreciate it.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thanks for having me.